Are we doing Psalm 27?
No, I thought we were done with the month of eight. We finished with the
No,
month
Psalm 27 goes till Hoshana
Okay.
Rabbah, actually.
of,
Sorry about
so I don't have a reader. Rabbi, would you like to read Psalm 27?
All right, let's see which version let me grab. I'll take the one from the CBST Siddur. Thank you, Yehuda Berger. Though it's not on page 27, the way the Chamachs or Lev Shalem has Psalm 27 on page 27, which I really love. Yes, so there is an element that the high holiday season goes through to Hoshana Rabbah. Not that Sukkot is a holiday of the days of awe, but that there's a midrash that the gates stay open till Hoshana Rabbah, actually. Which is this year, it will be the 27th of September. But so at CBST, we do Psalm 27 through Hoshana Rabbah, which there's no reason anybody else should know that, but we'll do it on Friday nights. Okay. So this is Psalm on page 188 of CBST Siddur. LeDavid Adonai ori v'ishi mimi ira. Adonai ma'oz chayai mimi efchad. You are my light and my help. Whom shall I fear? You are the fortress of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When enemies gather to attack me, it is they who stumble and fall. Were an army to besiege me, still I would have no fear. Though they strike out with weapons, my faith would remain firm. Even if war broke out against me, still I would be confident. One thing I ask, only this do I seek, to dwell in your house all the days of my life, to behold your loveliness in the light of your temple dawn. You will shelter me under your protection, concealing me in your tent. You will lift me to safety on a high rock, raising my head above all my foes. I will bring you offerings of praise, of thanksgiving. I will sing and chant psalms of joy and praise to you. Hear me, my God, when I cry aloud. Be gracious and answer me. My heart cries, seek the divine face. Yes, it is your presence that I seek. Do not hide your face from me. You have been my help. Though my father and mother abandon me, you will take me in and care for me. Teach me your way, O God. Guide me on the right path. Protect me from ridiculing enemies who attack me with lies and threats. Had I not the faith that your justice and your goodness would finally appear, it is unthinkable. Hope in God. Find strength and courage within your heart and hope in God. Thank you. So we are going to try and go with a good pace through the offerings now. So we're not going to have discussions between them so that we can go through as many as we possibly can today. Right, Harold?
That is correct. So, and what time is Rabbi Moskowitz joining us?
10:45, he's coming.
Okay, so we have half an hour. Go ahead, Randy.
My Psalm of Gratitude and Hope, written during the days of awe. A psalm dedicated to joy in the new year, 5782. I express gratitude to Yud He Vav He, for when I looked up, I found strength to look within. Yud He Vav He, my heart, I weep and you are with me. Shekhinah, you help me rise from the pit of despair. Through your loving kindness and forgiveness, I plunge into peace. I sing a psalm to Yud He Vav He of gratitude. I need to know the presence of Yud He Vav He all the days of my life. Erech Apayim, slow to anger and full of love. Sadness in the evening, solace in the morning song. Yud He Vav He lives in my broken heart. I will not stumble and fall. Adonai, it was your rachum on the mountain high that is the stronghold of the Jewish people. When you hid your face from your children, it was terrifying. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The Israelites called out, Yud He Vav He showed chesed. On the journey, we lost our way. Through exploration of our actions, we avoid going down into the pit. Be gracious. Hear my prayer. I am asking for your help. You turn my tears into joyful hope. Unbound my self-loathing, freeing me to forgive. My broken heart is healing as I sing my psalm to you. I have discovered your light, finding truth, pride, love, and forgiveness. Yud Hey Vav Hey, forever I will be grateful.
Wow, just beautiful. Just beautiful, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Barbara, hold on. Barbara Grindell asked to go next. Barbara, are you here?
Yes, right here.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Psalm 30. Let me get through the night to reach the morning, to find sunshine and light. I need the light to feel safe and calm. We can escape the darkness of the night when you are with us, Adonai, and not hiding your face. You healed me when I cried out. You saved me from going down into the pit. When I was in my early 40s, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had many scary nights. Will having the surgery cure me? Will I ever feel whole again? Will I ever feel joy? Now, almost 30 years later, I can say yes to those questions. I prayed to you, Adonai, and you saved me. You turned my crying into dancing. I am so grateful. I will praise you forever.
Beautiful. Barbara, just really beautiful, very moving. Very moving.
Thank you. Donna Gray.
Baruch atah Adonai. I praise you, my God, for you have lifted me up. You have not let the forces that pull me down into the pit have their way with me. O God, my God, I cried out to you and you healed me. You breathed life back into my lungs and raised me up from the dead. You brought me hope when I was on the verge of despair. You escorted me out of the city for a week in the country. You showed me for the first time in my life how sweet it is to be chosen by a dog. During the visit with my friend Marilyn, who boards dogs, a little black cockapoo named Lulu followed me to the guest house and didn't want to leave my side. I know you were there in Lulu, Adonai, in her constantly wagging little tail, in the trust that let her curl up and sleep in my presence, in the steadfastness of her devotion when she had chosen me. In these days of Elul approaching the new Jewish year, as I take stock of what I've lost and what I've gained, of what I've done wrong and what I've gotten right, I sing out your praises. You turn my mourning into dancing. I know the circle will spin round and round as the dancing and mourning keep trading places, sometimes even showing up hand in hand. Let me meet them both with gratitude for the fullness of life they hold. Let me be sealed in the book of life for another year, remembering how apples and honey sweet it can be to be chosen by a dog named Lulu.
Wow. Just beautiful, Donna. Really beautiful. Really.
I was changed by that experience.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Is Judith here? Do we see her?
Her internet's not working again, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
So
no.
let's skip over this one for now. Is Goldalee here? Goldalee,
Yes, Harold, thank you.
can you read to us or do you want, is that possible?
If you could, I preferred if you could play it, but whichever.
You know, if you could read it, that would be great. I'm sorry, I just don't have the recording keyed up.
Okay. Trembling gratitude, a Psalm 30 chant. Though I once walked with fear, you walked here beside. Though I walk with fear, you walk here beside. Though fear walks through here, you walk here beside. When I walked through fear, you were here beside. Though I walk with fear, you are here beside. As I walk from fear, you'll be here beside. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie, Kyrie, shalom. Kyrie eleison, Shalom, shalom, shalom. So fear walks through here, you are here beside. So fear may walk through here, you shalom beside. Now fear walks from here, and only love abides. Kiri eleison, shalom, shalom, shalom. Kiri eleison, shchina, shalom, shalom. Though fear may appear, you are always here. Though fear may appear, you are always here. Shalom, 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 shalom.
Wow. Beautiful, Goldalee.
Thank
And
you
I
so
also-
much.
I had distributed, Goldley had sent a recorded version, which is on the email that you all got last week that you can play. Lori, I believe we read yours last week. So we're up to Jeremy Lawrence.
A psalm to a psalm. A psalm for the inauguration of the house of the Lord, so reads the superscription, at least an educated guess. Or, to David having created a mishkan for God to house the words we've carried through the wilderness. Or, to David at the head of the house that will build the temple at last in Jerusalem. Or, to David's house that will bring us at last the moment when the world to come becomes the world of now. For now, here's my appreciation of this psalm, this cornerstone to the temples we carry through the wilderness of our lives. A reminder that after crying ourselves to sleep, we awake to a day which may be free from mourning, climbing out from the pits we have dug in our lives that the right has dug up for our rights. And hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, COVID, acts of God, nightmares that have turned our days into nights. Still we climb out, and our careful first steps project our bodies forward as if we are dancing, graceful and full of God's grace. To get even this far took all of our strength, and all of that strength was a blessing from God, Odecha, Odecha, Odecha. God created the world from nothing and darkness, so from darkness and nothing, we recreate the world. With a laugh and a cry, our lungs gasp. Inhale, exhale, choose life, says God. And the opposite of death is breath. Thank you, Rabbi, for
Wow.
helping me with the tohu bohu.
Beautiful, Jeremy. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Wow.
And Jeremy,
Monica?
I just read your comment also about the color of the box during Yontif. That's an incredible image that you just offered. Thank you in the chat. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can you make this a little bigger, Harold? Is that possible? Great. Okay. So there's a chorus here, and it's from that thing where you change one letter in a word to get from one word to another, but I couldn't really do it from morning to dancing because morning has one extra letter. So you'll see.
Okay.
First, to get to morning, how to get there from rage. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross with your 5 stages. You only took us from grief into acceptance. Apparently, acceptance is the paper hoop through which the once aggrieved can burst forth leaping, ride the white horse in ecstasy and praise. Me, I'm still stuck somewhere between denial and bargaining, where rock-face anger abrades. Let ragged nails and crusts now turn to teardrops. Mourning, moaning, mooring, mincing, droning, drying, crying, tensing, roaring, pouring, pining, sensing, winging, ringing, singing, dancing. So skinned of anger, let the sorrows come, the grief and terror, as the Afghans run to cling to rising plains, now drop are fallen. Flood waters rise, not only where the levees, well known to overflow, now saturate bandstand and bayou, but here in the northeast, Mother and son drown in their queen's apartment. Ida wrenches her car, now turned to bath, as terrified commuter straggles out. Mourning, moaning, mooring, mincing, droning, drying, crying, tensing, roaring, pouring, pining, sensing, winging, ringing, singing, dancing. How will I get to praising in this muck? Neighbors claim secret bounties for their calls, listening for fetal heartbeats through the walls. Old friends turn callous, crazed, excuses, gifts, anti-Jewish collages, PDFs, bedbugs and mice, and my own body mad at me in anguish, sore and waking at 3 a.m. I would feel guilty snaking around with grapevine step or dervish glad. Mourning, moaning, mooring, mincing, droning, drying, crying, tensing, roaring, pouring, pining, sensing, winging, ringing, singing, dancing.
Wow. Beautiful, Monica. Love this. So
Wow.
pretty. Thank you.
Ira?
Yes. Thank you. You turn my mourning into dancing. The thing is, God, I'm not very good at dancing. It feels awkward, clumsy. Self-consciousness prevents my letting go, allowing your presence to fill me with ecstasy. And besides, here in the pit, there's no room to dance, no air to fill the lungs. So how can I sing praises to you? How can I whirl like an entranced dervish drunk on love for you? That is, after all, what I long for, to feel your love deep inside me, to let it crack open my heart and fill me with the divine. Yet you beckon me to dance. God, how can I deny you when you have blessed me with life, given me the gift of another day? So I ask just one thing. Help me. Help me climb out of the pit and find my way back to the light. With you illuminating my path, I will sing and dance and express eternal gratitude to you.
Wow.
Wow.
Ira, your writing, it just touches me so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm realizing that I think we missed Cole Goldstein back at the somehow here. Hold on.
Isn't Harold the best, you guys? Isn't it amazing what Harold does here?
Not seeing. Hold on. Oh, Donna Gray, Barbara Brindell, Judith. There was a. All right. Well, we are where we are. So let's keep going. Ira is followed by Randy, who read. Ben Shaffrin, are you here today, Ben?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
This is away from verse 12 of Psalm 30. David and William. Afarta mispedi lemachol. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the son of Yog, and all the clouds that load upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Oh, William, so many words, really? Surely you were familiar with David. You couldn't best him for brevity and beauty? And you thought you were the master. For shame. Not that we don't quote you almost as frequently, and not that you didn't have in mind La gente paga e rida vuela qua. Being an impresario, after all, the box had to be paramount. Still, if Anna Russell could do the entire ring in 20 minutes instead of 20 hours, couldn't lame Richard have hurried up? Maybe then he wouldn't have had to trade his kingdom for a horse. Some lousy deal maker he was. Didn't he read the art of the deal? David never had to do that, and he was as big a schemer as Richard when it came to wives. Oh, William, 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 I'm truly disappointed.
Wow. Ben, just love that. And so many great references there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is one line missing there. This was dedicated to Dean. Her comments in Chavruta inspired me.
Uh-huh.
you.
Beautiful.
Is
So
Scott
Harold
Soloway?
can add that, right, for the final version? Do you want to
Yeah.
add that as a line, Ben?
I can,
I will send it to,
okay, thank you. Is Scott Soloway here today?
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me
Yes,
okay?
we can
Fine,
hear
we can
you.
hear you fine.
Okay. Bait, I made it. I am here for the dedication. I have a home. Dilitani, you drew me out of the water so I can raise you, praise you. Shivati, I cried out for you. And what? You keep healing me. Chitani, you revive me when I feel trapped and cannot catch my breath. Zamru, I hear the song of the faithful and I sing along. Rega, a moment of anger, of tears, of heart pounding, of breathlessness in the middle of the night. And then Modani. Balemot, yes, easier to say I will not be moved when I live in ease. Oh, the youth of it all. Histarta, harder to hold on to that feeling when I cannot find your presence. Et Hanan, I beg of you, calling out your name. Hayagid, who will remember what words I spoke when I am dust? Shema, hear my Shema Yisrael and be a help to me. Vata Azreni, you surround me with joy to distract me from what I have lost. Edom, your holiness brings song. I will not be silent. I call your name and you are mine. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you.
Wow, Scott, beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, is Cole Goldstein here? Because I have her some in some other version that I could pull up if she's here. But otherwise, we will go to Sarah Siegel's Psalm 30.
I don't see Cole in the list.
All right, so Sarah Siegel, I know you are here.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Harold. That's great. Okay. Inspired by Psalm 30. God, pitachta saki, v'tazreini simcha. You have loosened my sackcloth and equipped me with joy. For the last 18 months of intensive Psalm study and reimagining. Oh, wow, man, this is totally different.
Okay, do you want to not read it? We'll take it down. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. I had a different version.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's hard to keep everything.
No,
great,
Harold, thank you very much. I didn't
as
even
it
expect
were.
to read it.
So we can go to Linda's offering for Psalm 51 and then Lori Krotman's offering for Psalm 51. Linda Solomon, would you like to share with us? Linda, you are here, correct?
I'm here.
Okay.
Do you have a copy of it to pull up, or do I?
Oh,
have to-
I thought it's up. Sorry.
No, thank you.
Okay, yes, I have a copy up. I just didn't share it. Let me
Thank
share. Feel like the ringmaster in the circus today. Okay, Linda's offering for Psalm 51.
Psalm 51, after reading Bernstein's interpretation, a letter to God asking to go home. Dear God, oh, to come home. I have yearned with my humble heart to come home to you, God. My childhood home here on earth is no more because all but 2 of the members of my family in my home are with you, God in heaven. Sorry. So if I long to be home again, that means that I long to be with you too. How can I leave my present life, my wife, and come home to you, God? How do I rectify both desires without cursing my life while longing for death? But maybe it is not death for which I seek. Maybe it is only the yearning of my spirit for you, dear God, which will create the connection to the ones I have lost. I hold dear their memories while I seek to be near you. Their essence is bound up in your light. Please, God, See this sinner for who she is and make me feel whole again. Wash me, cleanse me in your light, that I may be worthy to have a place in your home. Yes, I have sinned, but I know the destruction of my ways before, and with your guiding hand, may I never make those mistakes again. I beg your forgiveness and that of the people who have suffered by my transgressions. My ways in the future will not be as they were before. I promise. Please, God, take me home. Humbly, Linda, Golda Leah Bat Bracha Motel.
Wow, Linda, that is so moving. So moving. Thank you, Linda.
All right. And Lori Krotman, our other offering.
It's very hard for me not to talk more about each of these, but Harold
I
and
know.
I
Well,
agreed that in
well, you
order
do
for
have a
me
few
to
minutes. Well,
finish
we can go.
I
We're
know,
going
it's
to do.
so hard. I love
I
these.
know. I know. It's hard
We
for me
want to make
too.
sure we cover it all. I know, I agree.
Oh, it's like Sophie's choice here.
Oh, God. Okay. On sacrifice, bulls, rams, sheep, goats. That's the old way of sacrifice, asking for forgiveness, seeking repentance. But what if we don't have these creatures at our disposal? After all, current zoning laws would have a problem with harboring bleeding beings, not to mention sacrifices. What's a poor girl to do if she wants to repent, if she wants forgiveness, if she wants to be free from guilt and remorse? Well, how about sacrificing things our legal codes allow us to surrender, like our egos, those cumbersome inclinations, our vengeful thoughts, more nasties, our jibs and jabs to get even? What about laying down at the altar our harmful adaptations to reality that don't work anymore, and just get on with embracing whatever comes up in the moment with equanimity and neutrality? Ha, try that. Not so easy. Better to slay the bull than let go of myself.
Wow, that's so great, Lori. Wow.
All right, Rabbi, you have 7 minutes if you'd like to comment more. Sorry.
Well, these are
But
so moving.
this is
Have we
all
gotten-
the offerings. Unbelievable.
Have we gotten a chance now to hear everybody's voice offering their offerings? Hi,
Yes,
Sherry and Debbie in Tel Aviv.
I
Look
think
how
that
nice
this-
the light looks in Tel Aviv right now. I see it on your faces. It's beautiful. Is it now
Yes.
good, coming into sunset there? Is it almost Sukkot there? Yeah. So there you're getting do you face towards the sunset? Is your mirpeset looking at the sunset? Wow. All right, next CBST trip to Israel. We're all going over to their apartment. We'll all figure out how to do that. So those are really beautiful. So we've covered everybody who's made in, who's done it, except who was here today.
Everyone who's here has been able to read. Yes, we have now heard from everyone who was able to share their offerings for Psalm 30 and Psalm 51.
Okay.
Except for Sasha.
Oh, Sasha, I'm so sorry. Yes, Sasha, we have your video. Oh my God.
Great.
Hold on
Okay.
a second. We have something really exceptional. Thank you, Sasha. Oh my gosh, hard to juggle everything. Sasha, you emailed.
I know you're doing an amazing job. While you're looking for it, Harold, I'll
You
just
introduce
say,
it.
I'm going to introduce it. So this is my video offering for Psalm 30. And as you watch it, I encourage you to keep a lookout at everyone's feet. So just in case you see me dancing, you will know which one is me when you look at footwear or not.
Okay, Sasha, I'm just trying to find that link.
Oh, and yes, Jack Neiman is in Paris and Darina is in Bulgaria. Is that all of those the same time zone as Sherry and Debbie?
Sasha, did you email it to me?
I did. I'm just going to pull it up really quickly. So I'll send
Okay.
it to you in 2 seconds. Keep talking about global.
All right. Are you
global
emailing it or
Zoom,
texting
Rabbi.
it? Email it to me?
just-
Email it to me.
Just wanted to say for the schedule for this week, tonight Sukkot begins. We have a Sukkot program tonight just for new members. Anybody who's joined in the last, basically since a year ago, Rosh Hashanah. And then tomorrow morning, Sukkot services. we will gather as a class again Thursday morning, and I think Julia is doing her teaching about Shakespeare and the Psalms, which I'm very excited about. And that will be a 1-hour class on Thursday. I'm so excited about that. And then Friday night, we're celebrating the Psalms class as part of our Friday night service. So we're planning all different things to celebrate the Psalms class Friday night at services. And we're meeting with the medical team at noon, and we're hoping that we'll be able to have some people back in the sanctuary in a small numbers starting Friday night. And then we're meeting again on next Monday morning and next Thursday morning. That's right, Harold, right?
Yes, that is
Harold and I
correct.
will tell everybody exactly what we're going to be doing for those 2 days.
And I think it's only fitting that for what is probably the last offering we will share, we have Sasha, who was the original TA for this class, if I am correct, and stepped in at the very beginning to help the rabbi when she needed the help.
And
So
also I want to say Hallel is recited on Sukkot. So if you go to services, you get to hear a lot of beautiful Hallel singing.
let me just make sure that I get this with the right sound. And we have a real treat here from Sasha. Let me make it a whole screen. We can see this, and here we go.
Amen.
Wow, Sasha. Wow, spectacular, spectacular.
Thank you. So I just want to say the dancer in sneakers is me.
Yes.
And the choreography is from 13 years ago. It had a different score. And this music is Psalm 30 by Antoine Oumen. I don't know how to pronounce it. Corvo Neue Nederlands Religie. It's a Netherlands Psalm 30 interpretation that we were listening to. So I superimposed that score for this piece, for this class.
Wow, wow, wow. What a way to end today's session. That was just incredible. Thank you, everybody, for all of these spectacular offerings. And I really love the multimedia, that interaction with the Psalms, because that's what they were meant to do. And to bring through these issues, really, really beautiful. So Rabbi Moskowitz is trying to get into the class. We're having a little trouble getting him in. Or are you here now, Rabbi Moskowitz?
I am. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Wonderful. So we are going to now switch from Psalm 30 and 51. And thank you again to everyone who offered your own Psalms based on those today. And I've invited Rabbi Moskowitz here that he and I are going to discuss what he's going to be teaching in this slot, starting, I think it's October 12th we're starting, or 11th, somewhere in mid-October. And it'll be 4 days a week in the same slot, the same thing. The class will open 15 minutes early, people for schmoozing, and then the teaching. And I'm going to start, Rabbi Moskowitz, and then you're going to take over, okay, right now, so I can describe. And this is going to be a very different class from what we do in the Psalms class, although it shares that it starts with text. And for Jewish, our Jewish concept of relating to God is deep in study of text. And the study of text is really an access to a spiritual level that's very classically Jewish. And now Psalms is something that I am really, really, really comfortable with, having been studying them for 40 years or so. And Rabbi Moskowitz brings a level of depth to Mishnah and Talmud that's unheard of, as I've said before, in the liberal world, but not just in the liberal world. His level of scholarship is extremely, extremely high, even in the most Orthodox and traditional and Haredi world. So, so this is an extraordinary opportunity that he's going to teach on a beginner level, people to learn how to study Mishnah and Talmud, which is a spiritual exercise that's unparalleled in Jewish practice. I want to talk a little bit about what Mishnah and Talmud are, and then we're going to talk about how the class will run. And it's going to be a 6-month class going from October 12th until I return. So if you dedicate yourself to this and say you're going to take this on for these 6 months, I promise you, your lives and your sense of Yiddishkeit and your sense of yourselves will be deeply transformed. Jewish study takes a lot of work, as we've all learned, and many of you have jumped into learning Hebrew, which is so moving to me. So first, a little bit about Mishnah and Talmud. The class, let me say, first of all, the structure of the class will be a little different because there's going to be, it's very deeply a part of studying Jewish text to do chavruta on a regular basis. And in fact, in traditional Jewish learning centers, like in a yeshiva, one studies in chavruta before the rabbi teaches a class, or the rabbi teaches first, you study in chavruta, and then the rabbi teaches. So that the concept is you're supposed to be getting familiar, like you all have started to learn in the Psalms class. By encountering the text in a small group, traditionally it's a pair, but 2 or 3 people, you're going to come across the problems or encounter the difficulties or come up with questions that, so when you hear the rabbi give a class, will be sharper with how you understand it. So where this class is going to try and imitate that a little bit, but we haven't yet decided, since it's more difficult on Zoom to have assigned chavruta, we haven't figured that one out. So it might be random each day, but it'll be Rabbi Moskowitz will open each class with a teaching about what will be studying on that morning. And then there'll be a 15 or a 20-minute chavruta time, the same thing every day to really start to understand the text. And then coming back, Rabbi Moskowitz will teach about the text that you've studied. And it takes time. It's a different rhythm, and I promise you it'll be very exciting. So I want to start by, Harold, do you have that big chart in with the English to describe?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay. So when we talk about Mishnah and Talmud and Bible, first of all, so I want to look at the Masechet. So the Mishnah was studied by the rabbi, was created by the rabbis in these very generalized terms from the year of the common era of about 0 roughly-ish to about the year 200. And then the Gemara or Talmud is from the year 200 roughly to the year 500. The year Talmud means both. So you can imagine the Bible is closed, and we've talked about that. The Bible, which we call the written Torah, is closed. And then there are a lot of things that are hard to understand. So the Bible says, the Chumash says, Shamor, observe Shabbat. But it doesn't tell us how to observe Shabbat. The only thing we have about Shabbat in the Bible itself is that you're not supposed to collect wood and you're not supposed to have a fire. But other than that, there is not a word about what it means to observe Shabbat and what happens when you don't have the temple anymore to do sacrifices. So the Mishnah are 200 years of the rabbis in this very generalized, simplistic way, trying to understand how to live our lives as Jews based on the written Torah. The written Torah is the books of the Tanakh, which we've discussed in the Psalms class. So based on the Tanakh, how do we as Jews live our lives? There's a lot of open questions, and that example of Shabbat is a good one because there's no detail given in the Chumash about how to, and then when we leave, when we don't have the temple anymore to offer sacrifices. So the rabbis in the Mishnah debate, discuss, they come up with a framework for observing Shabbat. But guess what? Even in that framework that the rabbis of the Mishnah time, or we call it the Mishnaic time, some of you might remember when I gave a lecture way back when we began that Judaism talks about our history in literature terms. So we'll talk about the biblical period of our history, the Mishnaic period of our history, unlike European cultures, which talk about kings and queens as their historical moments. We talk about literature. We talk about the texts. So the Mishnaic period have the rabbis doing the first generations of understanding how we live our lives. Tachlis, concrete. But they leave a lot of questions behind. And then the next period of 200 to 500, they try to understand what those early rabbis meant. The closer you get to the center, which is the Tanakh itself, the more authoritative. So the generations that go out from there, so the circle of the rabbis who studied in the Mishnaic period, can't explicitly undermine what's written in the Tanakh, but they can interpret it and understand how it's meant. And each generation subsequently, as we get farther and farther away, has to respect the generations before, but can layer it on with tradition. So the complicated thing is that the word Talmud, which is Hebrew, and Gemara, which is Aramaic, can refer to either all of the oral Torah, which is Mishnah and Talmud, or just the 300 years of commentary on the Mishnah itself. So that's a little complicated what the words mean. Torah itself can mean written Torah and oral Torah. Okay, so these are really important concepts to get as the picture. So the Mishnah has 6 sections, 6 big sections of the Mishnah, which is mostly in Hebrew. And those 6 sections of the Mishnah then are discussed by the rabbis of the Talmud period or Gemara, mostly in Aramaic. So the languages shift, although it's not 100%, but most of the commentary is of the rabbis from the years 200 to 500. This is all called the oral Torah. Torah Shebal Peh is all this period of the Mishnah and the Talmud. The oral Torah, originally it was not written down, but only memorized. So if there are 6 Sidarim, Seders of the, or sections of the Mishnah, each of those has sections of the Talmud, which make for many, 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 many sections. To make it even more complicated, there are 2 Talmuds in our tradition. One, the Yerushalmi, which is the final column in this, and one, the Bavli. The Yerushalmi means the Jerusalem Talmud, which is a little also not exactly right. It wasn't written in Jerusalem, but it was written in Palestine. And the Talmud Bavli was mostly written in the very, very important yeshivas of Sura and Pumbedita, these big, very important centers in Babylonia. The Babylonian Talmud, for all different reasons that I'm sure Rabbi Moskowitz will get into in the course of study, is mostly considered the source for rabbinic decision today, although we also consult the Yerushalmi, absolutely, but the Bavli is more comprehensive or more exhaustive or more, I'm not sure the correct word is complete, and Rabbi Moskowitz will correct me if I make any incorrect.
Authoritative is maybe the right word.
Authoritative, okay, authoritative. So the Bavli is considered more authoritative than the Yerushalmi, but both are studied. This is just, I want to explain all these columns here. So Mesechet means the section of the Talmud itself. So you see all the different, the Seder Zeraim means that's the Mishnah. And then on that, there are all these sections of the Talmud explaining that. So if you go down, you see where it says Seder Zeraim, then Seder Moed. That's the Mishnah. And then you see all the sections in the Talmud, and then Seder, you keep going through all the Mishnah. All right. So keep going down, and so you see those green, that's all the, and then at the bottom, you can see there are 63 sections of the Talmud that add up to a lot of pages and a lot of study. If you studied 1 page of the Talmud a day, which is called Daf Yomi, and there's a very serious program of doing that, and many, many, many Jews around the world do it, and there's a set Daf Yomi, although there are a couple of different versions of it. Rabbi Moskowitz, is it 7 years or 7.5 years?
Yeah, it's 7.5 years approximately. It's about yeah, it's at the bottom of this at the chart that has a number of pages altogether, but it's yeah, 2,711 pages. So if you do 1 a day, it takes approximately 7.5 years. And
so there's a whole tradition of doing that. It means you don't go into really deep study of each page. You can't, you don't, but you get. So there, if you go down, Harold, can you go down farther to the next graph just to see it right there? So that's another way to look at it. Those are the 6 orders of the Mishnah. And each of those orders has all these multiple sections of commentary on it. Again, so there'll be an example, like I just said about Shabbat, or we could take Pesach or any of them, where it starts with what's written in the Tanakh. Then the Mishnah tries to explain some of it. And then the Gemara goes deep, deep, deep into what it actually means and how to. After the year 500, there are then obviously another thousands of years, over 500 to now is what, 1,500 years of commentary on the Talmud itself and how we understand what the early generation meant. And those rabbis who are in the Mishnah period or the Gemara period are the greatest scholars that are considered, and some of them are beyond measure. Really, many of them are beyond measure. And so the Mishnah period, for those of you who are keeping in mind kind of Western Christian history, the Mishnah period is during the early years, coincides with the time of Jesus. And so those rabbis, the early rabbis, lived at the same time that Jesus lived. So that's the period of Mishnah. Okay, so let's just take a couple of questions on that, and then Rabbi Moskowitz will talk about which order and what he'll be teaching. No, it's not going to be a sampling. The idea is to go to get some depth. But you understand, when I was in high school, and I went to a modern Orthodox, which is considered super liberal from Rabbi Moskowitz's period, we studied Gemara 5 hours a day. that's considered nothing in the world of Gemara study. Not nothing, but it's not. And we got through about 5 pages of the Masechet, the beginning of Shabbat, in a year, doing 5 hours a day of studying Gemara. So, and that's not, so you can appreciate how much it takes to begin to wrap around it. It takes a lot of skill, but it's also, once you take a question on, you go deeper and deeper. It's a completely different kind of learning than American Western learning, which is all about how many pages can you cover. This is about how deep can you go? Where does one verse, one word take you into the world of intellect, spirit, history? All of these things are round up. So it's not about covering a lot of material. And every time, for instance, when I was in high school, which was, 5 hours a day on Gemara, you started by repeating what you learned the day before. You don't just move on until the point becomes, I could probably still recite that first page of the Masechet for Shabbat. The point is you go slowly and you go carefully, and you don't get any bonus points for going fast. The point is wherever you're studying, that is Jewish text study. So, okay, so let me stop there for questions, and then Rabbi Moskowitz will talk about
a few questions.
Seder and the Masechet he's going to be teaching and why he chose what he chose. And we'll talk about that. Okay, Robin Basler.
A few questions that we've had even before this was,
okay,
the day and time are the same as the Psalms class. It's
exactly the same as
45
Psalms.
Monday through Thursday. And is there an understanding that you need to be there every day, or can you come and go as your schedule permits?
Let me say it this way, and then Rabbi Moskowitz can add, the more you're there, it's gonna be harder to miss, although it will be recorded. But I strongly encourage you to consider really trying to make the commitment to it. But yes, you can miss a couple of classes. It'll be harder. But just honestly, I think you felt that with even the Psalms class.
And
continuity is important.
What is the level of Hebrew or Aramaic
Everybody is
knowledge?
welcome. Everyone is welcome. No one in this class knows any Aramaic, so don't worry. Nobody's expecting Aramaic. But obviously, the more you know, the more you're able to decode yourselves and read, fantastic. The Mishnah is in Hebrew, and much of the Mishnah Hebrew is pretty straightforward for Hebrew readers. But we're not going to assume any background, but the more you know, the more you'll enjoy it. The more you'll get out of that level. But it is designed to be a beginner class, and hopefully it'll motivate you.
Okay. So
Aramaic is a Semitic language. And as I said, as a Semitic language, it shares with Hebrew and Arabic and Coptic and other Semitic languages the whole 3-letter root. Many of the words are similar to Hebrew, but it is a different language, and it was the vernacular language at the time, which is why the Gemara is in Aramaic. Okay,
right.
Other questions?
Robin Basler?
So the opportunity for this kind of learning has been on my bucket list for quite some time. So thank you to CBST and Rabbi Moskowitz for making it possible. Are there texts that you suggest we purchase to prepare and use during the class?
Yes, we're going to suggest a particular Mishnah. If you want, we'll also obviously be using Sefaria, but there is a particular Hebrew English Mishnah. Rabbi Moskowitz, did we decide on the Kahati?
Yeah, it's on some level, it's a personal preference, but if you want one text that's available in English that really gives access to many
I don't
other.
think people know enough to have a personal preference. That's why
Sure.
we want
So
to.
yeah, so Kahati I think is the one to go to. It's not hard to access. You can buy them by the singular volumes. I think they even make like paperback.
I'll put it in the chat, and we're going to put this information out publicly, but we just want Kahati is the name of the translator.
Yeah, Kahati was actually is a modern. He lived in Israel. He actually, I think he worked, I think either in the post office or in the local bank in Israel, and had a weekly column in the Jerusalem, maybe it was the Jerusalem Post, in the Israeli newspaper, and he wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, and then over time they compiled it, and it's a fabulous commentary.
You can buy one of the Siddharim of Seder, but I would recommend if you're going to take this class to get all 6. It's a wonderful thing to add as a Jewish library, but it's the Kahati Mishnah. I have a set myself. Okay, Susan.
Rabbi Kleinbaum, I think I got this wrong, but the name of one of the Talmuds is Bavli.
Bavli.
Bavli. And
yeah.
you said that was more authoritative. Why
Yeah.
is that?
I'm just put it, Bavli means Babylonian.
I can
So
speak to that.
Bavli means Babylonian, yeah.
Yeah, Susan, there are 2 main reasons. One is that the Jerusalem Talmud came before the Babylonian Talmud. So there's a difference here between academic Talmud and rabbinic Talmud. So my expertise is in rabbinic Talmud, although I did study academic Talmud at Yale and at JTS. In the rabbinic tradition, we believe that the rabbis in Babylonia had access to the Jerusalem Talmud. So one reason why it's authoritative is that they were able to see it, were exposed to it, and be able to either accept or reject. The second is that the caliber of rabbis at the time were predominantly geographically located in Babylonia because of the exile and because of poverty and hunger and etc. in Jerusalem, that we felt that the Talmud, that the tradition was more densely concentrated in Babylonia, and that's another reason why it's more authoritative. It's also the structure is very different. The Palestinian Talmud or the Jerusalem Talmud is much more laid out. It's, in fact, it says Tachazi, come and see, where in the Babylonian Talmud it says Tashma, come and hear. So the Babylonian Talmud is more of an invitation to a dialectic of like, come and be part of this conversation, and it's deliberately vague and ambiguous. So it very much incorporates the reader in that conversation, where in the Jerusalem Talmud, it's much more like this. And so it doesn't lend itself to the same type of engagement, which is another reason why people have invested in it. And as a result, we have more commentaries. And so for those reasons, it's deemed to be more authoritative. But in the absence of the Babylonian, and you'll notice in those charts, things dealing with agriculture, for example, in Zeroim, the first Seder, there's only one tractate in the Babylonian, but they have the Jerusalem, because in Jerusalem and in Israel, those agricultural laws still obtained.
Great, thank you,
So
Rabbi.
at a certain point, the oral Torah, so the Torah Shebechtav is the Tanakh, the written Torah, and then the Torah Sheba'al Peh is the oral Torah. At a certain point that got written down. We're not going to talk about why that happened and when you take the class. All of these questions Rabbi Moskowitz will dive into. We don't have enough time right now, but the Talmud itself is never studied without the commentators on that. So even if we talk about the language of those 300 years piled on top of the first 200 years, those are all seen through the lens of the rabbis who came afterwards. So to even say that the Talmud is on Sepharia is not how Talmud is studied. Rabbi Moskowitz might use it to get to something, but if you look at a page of the Talmud, and we talked in my Yiddish class about the Halman V'Achim Ram publishing house in Vilna, they published in Vilna, Lithuania, and some of you remember from my Yiddish class, what's become the authoritative edition of the Talmud because of where they placed the commentaries when they laid out the Talmud in Vilna in the late 1700s and 1800s. And there it goes. And to this day, there's no, this is how the Talmud is laid out. Rabbi Moskowitz is going to go through the page of Talmud, explain what everything on it is. You're going to learn and understand what this is. Studying Talmud means looking at a page like this. So the center column is the Mishnah and then the Talmud, or Talmud totally. Again, the words are complicated. It'll start out with a few sentences. The Mishnahs are usually pretty short. And then there'll be like 5 sentences of a Mishnah or 10 sentences of a Mishnah, and then 100 pages of Gemara talking about that Mishnah, or 3 pages. And then all of the commentary around are very specific commentators trying to understand or explain or raise questions or debate or etc. So part of learning is to learn how to approach it all. It's going to be very different than Psalms, in which it's going to be about learning these different voices and what it means. Okay, so Rabbi Moskowitz, do you want to talk about what you're going to be teaching?
Sure. I see everybody's a little bit anxious and nervous. I had a Rosh Yeshiva used to say that the first time through the Talmud is the hardest. And he's right. So you're all in very good company. The first word that Harold showed in that page of Talmud, the very first word of the oral law, the first Mishnah is me'imasai, when. And I think on some level, yeah, there you go. On some level, whenever we start a project, whenever we start a trip or a journey, we all want to know when are we going to get there? And the Mishnah on some level answers the own question of me'imasai. It says, Kir neshama ba'arvin. Right now, it's the nighttime, say the Shema. And in fact, the reason why, according to the Vilna Gaon, that's the first Mishnah is because that's the first mitzvah that an adult has once they become an adult is at night by the B'nai mitzvah. And at night, we have a mitzvah to say the Shema. And so we always want to focus on the here and now. So we're going to learn a Mishnah, then we'll learn 2 Mishnayos and 3 Mishnayos. We're going to get started in that very first order of Seder Zeroyim, and it's Psachim. Psachim is generally the 4th tractate. It's after Brachos comes Eruvin and then Shabbos and then Psachim. Psachim is just a plural of Pesach. We actually have two Psachim, 2 Passovers. There's the first one and the second one. The second one's not as popular on the calendar, but also there used to be a carbon Pesach, right? The sacrifice. So we're going to start with the very first Mishnah, and we're going to go slowly. And you might have picked up, or I have a bit of a reputation of not being the slowest speaker. However, we can speak quickly many times. So there will be a lot of repetition because the word Mishnah on some level has a connection to repetition. It's it's an anagram for the word neshama, the soul. Mishnah itself is also, it means a teaching. And it also speaks to the necessity to see what is being concealed. I know this is a strange way of framing the class, but this class is really about sensitivity to language, to words, to letters. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is the person who redacted the Mishnah, and the rabbinic tradition, the oral law, Torah Sheba'al Peh, actually comes before the written law. I know that's counterintuitive. In this week's Torah portion, we read about Moses' death. Moses writes the Sefer Torah, the book, the scroll that we have in the Ark, on his deathbed. So he dies at 120 for 40 years in the desert from the giving of the Torah of the tablets and the second tablets that we just read about on Yom Kippur. There's 40 years where Moses is teaching. This is what Shabbos looks like. This is what tefillin looks like. This is what keeping kosher looks like. Right? And then finally on his deathbed, he writes it down. So in the rabbinic tradition, the oral law actually comes before. And then in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, there was a concern, 2nd century of the Common Era, that if it didn't get written down, it would be lost. But he wanted very intentionally to still mandate an oral accompaniment. And so what we're going to be doing is looking at the text, doing a close reading, and we're going to develop the ability and the sensitivity to say, this is odd. This is strange. If I was going to write this, I could have done this in fewer words. So there are 2 things to keep in mind in learning Mishnah, 2 major things. One is that even though it was written down, the author wanted to make it as easy as possible for us to memorize it. And so there's a lot of symmetry between the beginning and the end. In fact, the Gemara will say, why did it use this word that's not so accurate in the beginning of a Mishnah? Because it wanted to use the same word at the end of the Mishnah, and there it is accurate. And so it compromised accuracy for simplicity of memorization. So that's one piece. The second is that therefore it's concise and it's deliberate. It's also often bulky. And that's the second thing to keep in mind, which is that it is dense. There is much more there than just the words. And so to the extent that something seems odd is to the extent that we need to slow down and say there's a reason for that. And can I share my screen, Harold? Is that possible?
Just a minute. Sure. Anything for you, Rabbi Moskowitz.
Harold, you're the best.
No, you
so
are.
I'm going to share my screen, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay.
Harold, I don't believe everything I read. So you tell me I can share my screen. I believe you.
Wait, maybe you can't. Hold on. I'm trying chat stuff.
Take your time.
Rename. I am not the person who can make you the co-host.
Tasha?
I think it has to be Tasha.
Tasha,
you there?
Or what would you like to share, Rabbi?
I'm doing it now.
Okay.
Fantastic. So I want to share two things. One is Sefaria. It's Sefaria is your friend. It's something that we're going to be using as the core text. I saw that they have commentaries on Mishnah, which are in English. So it's worth, if you want to like prep for this, the thing to do is to explore Sefaria. I'll show you how to do that. And then I just want to like show you a little bit how to get to this Mishnah and also what I mean in terms of like odd strangeness. So I have something weird with my screen with Sefaria. I have to figure out how to do this. But in Sefaria, you would go to texts. And then Mishnah is the second one. So this is that first order, Seder Zeroyim. They've translated as agriculture. And we want the next Seder, which is Seder Moed, the festivals.
Right.
Again, in the Babylonian Talmud, there's only the Talmud on Brachos. And then it goes to Shabbos, Eruvin, and then Psachim. So we want Psachim. And if you click on it, you'll see that there are 10 chapters. The 10th chapter, which at some point we'll get to, whether it's in order or we skip there, depending on how long it takes, deals with the night of the Passover Seder. That is one of the reasons why I chose this tractate, because people have a familiarity with Passover for the most part, certainly the night of the Seder. It starts in preparation for Passover, which is in the searching for the chametz, which also for many people, they have fond memories of searching for unleavened bread as a child. So this is the very first Mishnah. And the very first word is the word or. Does anyone know what the word or means?
Does that mean light, Rabbi?
Harold, it does mean light. You get an A. So on the light, le arba asar, to the 14th. So already there are a lot of things which are strange. We have words for day and night, yom, laila, erev. We have words for the twilight zone, ben hashmashos. The word or, meaning light, is an odd word to indicate time. The prefix lamed, and here there's some manuscript variations, is also very strange. When we think about time, it's on the, right? On the eve of. The letter lamed is the prefix, the preposition to. So on the light, towards or to the 14th. What's also odd by omission is there's no month. The 14th of what? Is it a day on the calendar? Is it an hour in the day? We are searching out chametz, again, the same word or light of a candle. To use the same word in one sentence in two different ways is also awkward. And we're going to see that the rabbis point out that the word ner is not just, it's candle, but it's a particular candle. Not a Havdalah candle, which has a halachic category as a torch because it has multiple wicks. So one other just observation here, but this is what it's going to look like. We're going to kind of give a framing of like.
Rabbi Moskowitz, can I interrupt just for a second? Because I'm going to have to jump off, but you can continue with folks. I have to go to another meeting. But Rabbi Moskowitz can stay on with people and you can, for another 15 minutes if people need to talk and have questions. And just look out, we are going to ask for registration for this class because we have to also ask for registration and for contributions, what anybody could make. Unfortunately, you know, our budget is quite tight and unless we can raise significant funds for Rabbi Moskowitz, he himself, we're going to have to cut his presence at CBSC to half time in next year's budget. So we're working very hard on raising some more money. But there will be a registration where people could pay whatever they can to help support this class. But I'll talk more about that when we get to the end and talk about the whole Lair House project for next year. But for me, it's a huge, huge honor to have Rabbi Moskowitz as part of CBST. And all of you have an incredible opportunity. He's a very gentle and loving and compassionate teacher. And everybody is welcome, whatever level you're at. And you'll learn things that you hadn't imagined it possible to learn, whatever your age and whatever your background, whoever you are. So I'm going to sign off for now, but you guys can stay on with Rabbi Moskowitz. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good Erev Yom Tov to you. Enjoy. Okay,
I need to go also. I will just say I am not going to be the TA for Rabbi Moskowitz's class. He may be hiring, but we will certainly be keeping people on the Psalms class email updated as we get information about registration. And Rabbi Moskowitz, perhaps you can even tell me the book. If you can give me an Amazon link to the book you're suggesting, book or books you're suggesting people might buy who want to get oriented, I can send that out. So
Yeah,
thank you, everybody.
I will send you a text. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Sukkot. So just one other observation from here as an allusion to this idea of the oral law coming before this, is that the Mishnah gives a proof of a principle. In any place where chametz does not enter, one does not need to search. This is odd for all sorts of reasons. Normally, when we think about obligations, it's a binary, that I'm either obligated or I'm exempt. This idea of I don't have to is a strange formation, in addition to the fact that it's in the negative. Why not say in the positive, any place where chametz enters, you have to search. A place where chametz does not enter here it says it's not necessary. Not necessary is vague and ambiguous, right? So for a question that we could ask, and we'll get much more into this, but just to get you thinking about the types of questions we would ask, is I understand I'm not obligated, but let's say I want to. Am I fulfilling the mitzvah or not? So for example, if a person, let's say, gives tithes, they give 10%. So a person gives 11%, that's still tzedakah, right? That's still called a donation. But let's say a person wants to put tefillin, phylacteries, on their leg. That's not a mitzvah. You can't just always do more and get credit for it. So here, when we think about searching for chametz, let's say a person's attic, a bathroom, there's certain places where chametz doesn't normally enter. We're going to see that there are going to be questions in Jewish law if a person chooses to search in such a place. But what does this language of I'm not obligated indicate about a fulfillment if I opt in for? And here, V'lama amush shtei shuris b'marte. This is a question. But what about 2 rows in a cellar? This is a wine cellar. And this is actually being asked as a challenge to this principle. Any place where chametz doesn't normally enter, you don't have to search. And here the Mishnah is asking from some sort of unknown source that it knows that 2 rows in a cellar, a person does have to check. The punctuation here is a little bit weird. This is the answer. The Mishnah is answering itself. That is a place where chametz does enter. And the commentaries explain that there were butlers who would come down with their food to refill the wine. So you'll learn a little bit, about the ways of people being. But the point is that here, there's no other teaching about 2 rows in a cellar. This is the source of it. And the Mishnah assumes that you know this teaching because it's part of the oral law. So these are just examples of the things that we would ask. And we're going to spend a long time on this Mishnah. And then you'll get introduced to some of the players, Beis Hillel and Shammai. They come much earlier. Hillel and Shammai is 2 people, but their students go on for several generations. It starts with just a handful of disputes and ends up with hundreds of disputes. They have very distinct personalities. But that's the way to access this text. Things in bold are their translation. The words which are not in bold are the words that you need to throw in there for the sentences to make sense. You'll notice there's more words that aren't there than words that are there. That's emblematic of every single Mishnah. It's dense, it's concise, and there's a lot of there, but it requires both an oral accompaniment of people who are part of the tradition as a way of maintaining it. And that's one of the reasons why academic Talmud and rabbinic Talmud are so different, that academic Talmud is not part of an insider tradition that goes back since it was written. It's very much coming on some level from the outside. And as a result, they are very, very different and useful modalities of teaching. Okay, I know that there are probably some more questions, but just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight of what some of this might look like. And being that Harold is not here to moderate, if anyone wants to just unmute, I'm happy to attempt to address any sort of question. Lori.
In the course of discussing rabbinic Talmud, would you also at times integrate academic Talmud?
Yeah, absolutely. I find it to be useful. And to be completely honest, I find the questions to be much more useful than the answers for what it's worth, meaning every question is a proof to something because we believe that it makes sense. So if it doesn't make sense, it means we're missing something, right? Whether we're missing parts of the manuscript that used to be there or they were censored. And so particularly the work of seeing manuscript variations, I think is deeply helpful. It's not unique to academic Talmud. There were some in the rabbinic tradition. Tosfos does this, Rashi does this, the word girsa, right? In fact, we're going to see here that Rashi might have had a different text. So all of that, I'm very happy. I'm not here to be persuasive, if like to say it differently. I'm here to be, there are many, 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 many different ways to learn a Mishnah. In fact, just to show you very quickly, there are those who see this as there's ways to learn this through Musar and through Kabbalah and through Chassidus, right? The chametz is always seen as the evil inclination as opposed to matzah. Matzah is 3 letters. It's mem, tzadi, and a hey. This is the letter hey. So the only difference between chametz and matzah are these 2 letters. And you'll notice that this one has a break and this one is full. So the rabbis say the difference between matzah, which is unleavened bread, and chametz, which is leavened bread, is just that extra piece of arrogance. It's the hot air, it's the rising, it's being full of oneself, right? It's manifested in the letters. So if we see this as an allusion to the evil inclination, both nationally and individually, there are those who read this as actually a charge to the bar mitzvah boy, that Orla Arba Asar is at the very beginning of one's 14th year of existence, which means at their 13th birthday, a person needs to search out, right, the evil inclination within with the light of the candle. And of course, that's an allusion to the Torah, Ner mitzvah, v'Torah or. And any place where chametz doesn't enter, we all know what our struggles are, right? Some of us have too much patience. Some of us don't have enough patience. Don't be busy with the stuff you're already good at, right? You need to search out for the things which are difficult. So there are many different ways to learn this Mishnah. They're all true. We're going to focus more on what we call the pshat, which is the simple interpretation. But what I think what the other classes that we've done in Talmud, what people have appreciated is once we understand what it says, in Yiddish we say vashteta, right? Like what is it saying? Like what's actually being the simple interpretation? So then we can see into the pardes, the remez and the allusions and the drashas and the sod. There's a lot of there. There's infinite depth in all of this. But we're going to focus very much, the primary focus is going to be on the simple interpretation. Linda.
Rabbi Moskowitz, I'm looking forward to this, but I have to say one thing to you.
Please.
2 things, actually. It's hard to know what to ask if you've never studied this before and have no precepts about what we're going to be doing. And sometimes you make references to other things that we may not know if we're very new to this. So I'm asking kindly if when you make a reference to something that you give us some sort of information about that.
Absolutely, and thank you.
Thank you.
Was there a second thing?
Well, actually, that was it.
Okay, great. Yes, absolutely. One of the things that's a little bit tricky about Talmud and Mishnah is that it does assume that you know it all already. In fact, like we saw, the Mishnah assumes that we already know this oral tradition. So I think if at some point anybody hears something or sees something and it doesn't make sense based on what we've already seen, it's a legitimate question to ask, why are we supposed to know this already? Because sometimes that itself is an indicator that the Mishnah is trying to teach us something that it might be the source of. And you're right, like it's difficult to know what we don't know. And just to bring it back to Passover and the night of the Seder, it is one of the 4 sons, one of the 4 children is the one who doesn't even know how to ask. And the Sfas Emes points out, one of the Ger Rebbes, that the awkward placement of the word echad tam, echad, the one, by each of the 4 children, he says is an allusion to the fact that actually there's only one child. And it's each one of us. Each one of us have things that we are wise about. Each one of us has things that we're simple about. Each things that we don't even know how to ask, right? You bring your car in somewhere, you're like, it's making a noise. I don't even know, right? So we all have those things. And collectively, I'm very much optimistic that we'll be able to work through it together. Let's say Jack.
Good afternoon, Rabbi Moskowitz. It's great
Hello,
to be here.
friends.
I would just echo something that Linda said. You know, sometimes the words fly by, and I don't even, if you could put them in the chat so we have sort of a visual of what it is, you know, just like the pronunciation of it or whatever. That's sometimes where I get a little bit lost. The words fly by, and I'm not sure what I've heard.
Yeah, what I think will be helpful about the study of Talmud is that I think we all acknowledge that some of us do better visually, others, you know, through repetition, others through the audio. We're going to be staring and reviewing and repeating. I know this Mishnah by heart. I know I've probably honestly seen it. If it hasn't reached 1,000 times, it's close to 1,000 times. You don't need to get that many times to know it by heart. But the point is that even after a person knows it by heart, by seeing it and by repeating it again and again, there's more that's just simply revealed. And so we're going to slow it down. But I'll tell everybody, if you miss it the first time, if you miss it the second time, if you miss it the third time, there will be a fourth and a fifth and a sixth and a seventh and an eighth. And we'll try to do it in many different ways that instead of assuming that people are going to miss it, we hope to highlight new things each time. So I appreciate it, Jack, and I will slow it down.
I guess
and
I'm
whatever you
old
can't slow
school.
down.
I'm
Yeah,
used to the learning from a blackboard.
The good news here, I hated growing up because I have like some texture stuff in life. I hated the feel of chalk. And even the sounds of the chalkboard for me were like way too much. And so like it's not sad for me, but we will try very hard, particularly because I think on some of the screens you can like mark and highlight and circle and cut and paste. Are there other hands or any other questions before we sign off? I don't see anymore, but if yeah, please, Lori.
I think it might be helpful if just so we see the big picture. It's always easier for me anyway to understand this small thing when I see the big picture of where it fits. So if there is a good chart that says, okay, this is the Talmud, this is the Mishnah, these are the 6 orders, these are the tractates, and this is the little space where we're going to be.
Yeah,
I think I could follow it better. I have some of those charts from, you can go on Wikipedia and stuff, but I think that would be really helpful so we know where we are in the.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, there are a lot of different resources which are out there. And every year there's more and more. In terms of publishing companies, the one that I appreciate the most, in part because it's coming from my world, is ArtScroll. ArtScroll has, I think, an introduction to the Talmud. They just came out this last Sima Shas. They put out a beautiful volume. If you want something that's less, that is more grounded in history, like objectively, I don't know if you're familiar with Rabbi Beryl Wine. Rabbi Beryl Wine is an amazing historian. He's got to be in his mid-80s. I was a student of his 20-some years ago and got to learn with him for several years. He's fantastic. He's a very legitimate scholar in many different fields. He was a lawyer and he had a yeshiva, but he has thousands and thousands of audio tapes on history. History is his thing. And he's also written dozens of books. So he has something called the Oral Law Sinai. It's a beautiful volume with pictures. It's illustrated, and it's an illustrated history of the Mishnah. He has a second one, which is the same thing on the Talmud. It's called Vision and Valor, an illustrated history of the Talmud. His books, he has his own printing press. They're not so cheap, but they're beautiful, and they do give a bit of a background on who were the rabbis and where were they living in different generations and geographically who was a student. They also have charts, and there are things which are available online. I would say that for me, hearing it multiple times in different places has been better than any sort of book or reference of just saying, oh, I remember him. I learned about him over here. And he says this in the name of this person. Oh, that was his rabbi. So we're going to get to that. There's no real easy way. And to be completely transparent, like everybody who does this has an agenda, right? And so I think the best that I can do is be honest and name the different agendas of the different people who are doing it. And again, there's utility, I think, for most of these different agendas. Like they're not malicious, they're not bad. and the truth is, somewhere in between probably. But I would say that one of the things that's nice about Sefaria is that if you go over the name, often there'll be some dots underneath, and then you can click on it. Here, I'll show you very quickly. So for example, here, Beis Shammai. If you click on it, hold on, let's see here. I wonder if, oh, here it is. It's just my screen's weird. So Beis Hillel, literally the house of Hillel was a school of thought originating with the sage Hillel as a rival. It gives you some background. Yeah, so you'll find out a little bit about some of the players by just, if you hover and then click, and then here's the thing for Beis Shammai. So slowly you'll start piecing together, and you'll create kind of a tapestry of the context. But there's no, yeah, it takes time. It takes time. Marsha.
Oh, actually, I was just going to ask about the cast of characters that are that are on that page, Hillel and Shammai. Okay, and how they relate to each other geographically and chronologically, because the layers are there.
Absolutely, and Hillel himself travels a little bit. Born in one and he goes to the other. But like Rabbi Kleinbaum said, the Mishnah for the most part is in Hebrew. You do find some exceptions, particularly you'll notice in the Haggadah. We're going to keep referencing the Haggadah, which is the night of Passover. If you'll remember at the very beginning, when we say what's the very first thing is, anyone who's hungry, let them come and eat, and then I keep moving stuff, which is not great, but I normally have a Haggadah here. Anyways, the very first paragraph shifts from Hebrew to Aramaic. Hacha hashta l'shana haba ba'aretz Yisrael, in part because this was read primarily in Babylonia, and the Hebrew parts were inserted to make, because they didn't want people in Babylonia to think there was going to be a rebellion. So you do see the shift in Hebrew and Aramaic often as being intentional. And so whenever being sensitive to, like, I don't know what this means, but I know this is Aramaic, or I don't know what this means, but I know it's Hebrew, is also helpful in recognizing that there's some sort of shift happening. And part of that, it's where people grew up. And so, yeah, we will absolutely share all of that. I know I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. Any other questions before we get started? And also, people can feel free to shoot me an email, rabbimaskowitz@cbst.org. And I'm really excited. It's Mishnah is exciting. Talmud is exciting. We're going to really focus on Mishnah at the very beginning. ArtScroll does make does have a good translation to the Talmud. And for Psachim, and again, you can get the whole volume. You can get in the paperback even just the first chapter. There's no rush to any of it. There's also, if you want to brush up on your academic English, Sansino is an older translation, which I don't understand because of the English. But there's Koren, there's Steinsaltz has a translation. There are many different translations. It is a personal preference. Mine is ArtScroll, but it doesn't need to be anybody else's. So the Talmud is also in Sefaria, and it's exciting to be able to feel like you can gain access to information. And so Mishnah is much easier than Talmud, and so we're going to start with the Mishnah, and we're going to at least finish the first chapter of all of the Mishnayos before we get to any sort of Gemara. And also, this is not about my desire to teach as much as it is about y'all's desire to learn. So if there's strong feelings about learning a different chapter, about wanting to try out Talmud as opposed to Mishnah, about learning the Mishnah differently, there's also a different lens of learning it, what we call a liba de hilchasa, which just means orienting towards the practical law. Like, what does this mean about how am I supposed to search for chametz? Like, what does that mean? Can I use a flashlight? Can I use electric lights? Does it have to be with the light of a candle, right? These are all legitimate questions. And if there's a desire to see it through that lens, there are many different lenses by which a person can approach these texts. And again, they're all good and all legitimate. And from my perspective, I'm very much open to following the desire of the class. All right, friends. So we will be in touch. Tonight is Sukkot. It's a festival, one of the rare mitzvahs that we can do with our entire bodies. If it's safe to go into the sukkah, and really the sensation is to really be able to feel completely immersed, to feel surrounded, to feel, and that is on some level the experience of learning. You want to dive all the way in. You want to feel like you're swimming between the letters in the negative space, and to really allow it to, to feel like, we are being purified, we're being enhanced, we are having kind of a rejuvenation and a rebirth from the sea of the oral tradition. So I bless everybody that it should be restorative and pleasurable and relaxing and nourishing and all the things, and safe, and looking forward to getting together on the other side of it. All right, friends, take good care. Kol tov. Bye-bye.
Thank you.